There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing it all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that will lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of the comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. Okay, I cannot start a single leadership discussion anywhere in the world with leaders and managers and mention anything about younger generations at work. The complaints pour in right, left, and center. And I just want to say, this really doesn't have to be so hard. So what is it about Gen Z that makes them unique, valuable, and by the way, frustrating all at the same time? What are we going to do in a realistic day, in a realistic way, to get the best out of this generation? And that's what we're going to talk about with one of my absolute favorite experts on generations. So Dr. Tim Elmore, founder of Growing Leaders. You can find him at growingleaders.com, which is a nonprofit organization focused on creating emerging leaders. And it grew out of 20 years of service alongside with Dr. John C. Maxwell. Tim has been featured on every publication you would like to name. Name one, and it's probably listed in my list here. Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Psychology Today, CNN headlines. It could go on from there. If that's not enough, he's written 35 books and counting, including Habitudes, Images that Form Leadership Habits and Attitudes, The 8 Paradoxes of Great Leadership, which we've talked about on this show, A New Kind of Diversity, we've talked about that one on this show, and then more recently, The Future Begins with Z, 9 strategies to leading Generation Z as they upset the workplace. So Tim, welcome back.
Wanda, it's always good to be with you. We're about to have some fun, I can tell. It's gonna be great.
We are about to have some fun, I think. I hope so, because I really like this. This is an important topic, and it's a complicated topic, but let me start why. I always like to know the personal story. Why do you care so much about Gen Z? I mean, you've worked with hundreds of leaders at all sorts of levels.
Yeah.
Why do you care so much?
Well, I do because I'm seeing what you're seeing. The frustration levels are very high, mainly because they're coming in different. Sometimes we think worse, like unready for their career and not showing up on time and scrolling on their phones during work hours. And those may be true, they may be not. Sometimes I do think we buy into myths about this generation, but they're coming in so different. And Wanda, I'll cut straight to the chase. In chapter 1 of the new book, The Future Begins with Z, I lay out the challenge, which tends to make sense to everybody. I call it the Peter Pan paradox. So here's the deal. Well, first of all, everybody I think listening knows the story of Peter Pan, right? This whimsical character that flies into London, sprinkles pixie dust on everything, and magic happens. The other side of the coin, however, on Peter Pan is he never wants to grow up. He wants to live in Neverland where boys don't have to become men, etc., etc. Now, it's a metaphor, but here's what I'm seeing in the workplace today. The age of authority seems to be dropping. Kids are coming in smart as a whip on AI. They have intuition on smart technology, on the future customer. It's just amazing how the age of authority is going down. They don't need a badge to be valuable. At the same time, the age of maturity seems to be going up. So I've heard employers say 26 is the new 18, and that's scary to us. We need them at 18, at 19, 20. So you can imagine what this creates for a leader, an employer. We're frustrated by both the fact that they come in with smarts and they come in with a lack of social and emotional readiness. So my real quick, I'll stop here, but my real quick marching orders is, leaders, you're going to have to listen a little bit more than you ever used to listen to that 22-year-old. But you're going to have to coach a little bit more than you've ever had to coach that 22-year-old. If we're really ready to make that adaptation, I think we're going to make it work.
I have said of the last generation and now Gen Z in particular, especially Gen Z, that they are going to force us to be the leaders we should have been all along.
That's right. Yeah.
And, I quote your research, I'll quote several other people's research, and I'll sort of lay out a characteristic of what I believe the current younger generations, I don't care what you label them as, are expecting from their managers. And it's kind of what everybody wanted.
Yes. Yep.
Except that I think many generations kind of learned, like Gen X in particular, learned to settle for what they got, which was a pretty appalling amount. And they're kind of now a little resentful of,
Yeah.
I didn't get it, and why am I supposed to give it to you? At least that's my take of it.
Yeah. No, I see that.
But it's interesting if you think about the age of maturity or age of authority dropping. My friends and I joke, we think we could actually do minor surgery on a Google. Just Google it and watching a YouTube video, and there's not much you can't solve that's minor without a Google search. Well, if you're really skilled at that and really talented at that, the kind of whole credentialing and years of experience that we grew up with and other generations grew up with is just gone. So accept, don't accept. And by the way, the half-life of information is shorter than it ever was. So maybe it's a smarter thing. I don't know. Okay, so let's talk about the frustrations for a minute. Here's the negative comments. Gen Z doesn't want feedback. They won't take it. They're overly worried about their mental health, right, left, and center. They have no stamina or resilience. They won't stay. They won't push themselves hard. They think they know more than they do. They can't do what they think they can do. They don't understand how it works in the organization. They need too much hand-holding, and they won't listen to authority. There's my list. What did I miss?
Well, you touched on one that maybe you didn't say thoroughly, but I hear all the time from employers, I don't think they want to work. I mean, I see them come in at 5 o'clock, they're out the door. Like, I can hardly wait to leave this place. I don't even finish the task I'm working on. I'm out. But Wanda, I'm telling you, I sat down with I have lost count of the number of Gen Zers in focus groups from California to Georgia. And I began to throw all of these out, and I got some information that was very helpful. So for instance, let's talk about, do they really want to work? I talked to one gal in a focus group and said, your boss says you really don't want to work. What do you say to that? She shed some light on the issue. She said, Dr. Tim, can I tell you why I leave right at 5? I said, sure. She said, I leave right at 5 because I have to rush over to another job. I don't make enough money to pay the bills at this first one. And then when I'm done with that second job, I rush off to take care of my mother who has stage 4 cancer. So suddenly she's giving me a clinic on work ethic when I was sworn she didn't have it. So they do approach work differently than Xers or boomers. We have dutiful mindsets, show up at 8 and stay long, and that's all wonderful. They would say, well, I've seen workaholics who are 55 to 65 years old, and I don't want that. So they have said to me in focus groups, I wish work could feel like a hobby. And I thought, yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? And of course, what I wanted to say is, it's not your hobby, Josh. But here's what I heard. They're so afraid of getting a job they hate and then have golden handcuffs on them because now I need this job to pay the bills. So I started thinking about hobbies, and we started interacting, and it made sense. Wanda, think about the last time maybe that you had a great hobby. Maybe you were a young girl and it was playing tennis or stamp collection, or I remember I had a little train set in my basement that I worked on every day after school. I could hardly wait. What if work could feel like something I wanted to do, not had to do? And what if I could hardly wait to get to it? And what if I did my best work at 10 p.m., not 10 a.m.? Man, that's an employee I want. So I'm telling employers, what if you profile the job differently? Duty is not their motivation like it is you, Bob, but you might get so much more out of them if it felt more like, I can hardly wait to do this. I'll stop there. But
yeah, I mean, well, first off, that's how I feel about my job 90% of the time, but I'm lucky. I recognize not very many people, regardless of seniority, feel that way about their job, and that it's a hobby. But I hear leaders say to me all the time, I get that, me too, but I hired them to do some stuff I just need people to do, and it's not always great. So what's your response to that? Because that's the truth. They're cheaper. We hire them to do labor we can't get to.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. And on the answer to most of the 9 challenges or 9 strategies in this book are a meet in the middle. So you're right. The meeting starts at 8. you need them to be there at 8, not 8:15, not 8:20, and not wearing flip-flops and, whatever. So, but I think so often somebody joins our team at 22 years old, right out of college. They may have never had a full-time job before. I'm not excusing them. I'm explaining them. We might need to coach a little bit more than we've ever needed to coach and say, listen, I need you. We need you right here at 8. And it actually communicates something you don't want to communicate. Disrespect when you show up at 8:10. So you have to think about it. College class, you have to show up on time. In fact, you didn't even have to show up. You got AI taking notes or your friend taking notes. So I think we're having to remember they've mastered the classroom, but not yet the workroom. And so I need to coach on that. But I would say one other thing. I feel as though something you said earlier was brilliant. I think I'll just speak for me. I need to adapt a bit. Somebody said to me, and I embraced it, Generation Z is the sandpaper on my leadership I did not know I needed. I love that phrase.
Yeah.
So I'm being polished. I'm being polished up. And you're right. Other generations seem to put up with it. Gen Z goes, I'm not putting up with BS. So I really feel like I'm a better leader if I'll adapt and become better along the way as they demanded at 22 years old.
Yeah. I talk to lots of millennial leaders who are now the managers for the Gen Zs. And I have a lot of empathy for people in this mid-career patch, They're fighting super hard to get ahead. They are way overloaded in terms of the demands on their time and the expectations of what they'll deliver and. They don't have the staffing that prior years would have had. In fact, they didn't have the staffing that the predecessor had. Yes, of course, AI is supposed to be a great release, and so we should be able to get it done, but I need time to get the AI up to speed. It's like they're just stuck between literally a rock and a hard place and probably 5 other things we haven't named. And their ability to spend time is just gone. Their ability to spend time on, and I get an awful lot of, I just can't think about it.
Yeah.
Just get the job done.
Yeah. No, you're right. If you're ready for me to volley back, I hear this all the time. In fact, there's a new phenomenon happening right now called quiet cracking.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we've heard of quiet quitting. Quiet cracking is the slow evolving burnout that happens when I'm asked to do a lot for no more compensation. Maybe a millennial manager has this as well as a Gen Zer, but we don't seem to get this emotional support that we feel like we need. And the millennial might go, I don't have time for that, like you just said. But quiet cracking it's like a windshield crack. It starts as a little crack and go, oh, I probably ought to patch that up sometime soon. If we wait, that crack becomes so big, you can't fix the crack. You have to replace the entire windshield. We don't want that with an employee. At least I don't think we do. So, but they're asking for emotional support. They are asking for more compensation. If you give me more work, that may or may not happen. But here's what I hate about quiet cracking, Wanda. What happens is they get so angry and frustrated at their current work conditions. They not only withdraw and disengaged, they quit at the most
critical moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Like what's bad for you. I'm picking this time because I hate you. And I just think this doesn't need to happen. So again, listeners, you might go, I don't have time for this, but we need to earn the right to lead, not through the badge we wear, but through the bridge we build. And these relational bridges, 5 minutes at a time. I know you think you don't have time. I think you can't afford not to do this. This is my opinion, but Wanda asked me on the show. So I'm saying, if I'll make that connection, even at our first job interview, find out what the keys to their heart are. They love dogs. They love the Cubs, whatever. But then in the hallway, hey, how about those Cubs or whatever? You're just making a little bit of a connection that says, I'm not a commodity to you, boss. I'm a real person.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. Well, I'm going to come back to this one for just one moment to say I have a lot of empathy for millennial leaders because we have not properly trained them for the world that they are facing as a leader and for the demands that are on their time. And I think we're being completely unfair to them. And anybody who believes that, go check out my website, exceptionalleaders.com. I'm happy to talk to you in any format because I think we're screwing up our companies by not paying attention to this issue. And then equally, we have got to help them help Gen Z, and Gen Z to help the millennial leaders as well. I think it goes both ways. All right, I want to come back to one thing you said, Tim, which is the emotional maturity is going down. You know, as I grew up, we had summer jobs, we had part-time jobs. They were expected that you did that. That was kind of a norm, and they were widely available. That they haven't been available for younger gen. I mean, you can say all you want about they don't know what they're doing, but where has there been an opportunity to have a summer job other than maybe a summer camp somewhere? Is about, at least that's what I'm watching with the younger workers. So I think that's interesting. Okay, let's talk. So I don't want to blame them. I just want to say the state of affairs is the state of affairs. They're going to need coaching on basic work ethic principles and expectations with humanity, knowing a bit about you. And I don't think that's such a bad thing to ask.
I don't either. Do you mind if I comment real quick on
Yeah.
what you said with the workforce and the opportunities? Aside from what you said, there is a coming, I'm using a metaphor now, Wanda. There's a coming storm that may start with a blizzard and end with a ice age. So the labor force coming into the job market is shrinking. The Generation Zers are much smaller than the millennials. Millennials are the largest generation in America, 80 million strong. Gen Zers are 59 million. So just know, numbers wise, there's fewer coming in. So we want to pick the best, right? If we're hiring, pick the best. Number two, the younger generation is less apt to take entry-level jobs like fast food restaurants. So, and at least in my area, north of Atlanta, they might go, oh, fast food restaurants, that's beneath me. Well, Wanda, I'm like you. I took those jobs all through my teen years. I was a little bit more ready for a full-time job because I'd already had 7 jobs throughout high school and college. But here's the kicker. Do you realize, listeners, that in the next 5 to 10 years, somewhere in that zone, there'll be more 65-year-olds than 16-year-olds in America? So that's crazy. Now, around the world, it may be different.
It's
But I think,
happening. Yeah, it's happening in all the Western countries are going to hit
yeah,
pretty hard.
yeah, Europe,
Japan is already pretty hardly
I
hit by
know,
that.
it's true.
The subcontinent, African countries and some of the Asian countries are the only exceptions that I know. And South America is much slower. I've been tracking this trend for quite a while. It's also true, Tim, though, that this generation can make a lot of money on a side hustle.
Yes, no doubt.
And they, we think they haven't had a job, but they've been doing a side hustle for years, like early teens. Influencer jobs, whether I may think that's real or not, I understand how it works. It doesn't matter. They're making money on it. They're making products, selling products. I mean, all sorts of stuff that they have been doing. Why would I want to go work at a fast food restaurant or a convenience store? Or I get it, So the ones I want in my workplace are the ones that have seen a lot of other ways of making money. All right, let's talk about this issue of feedback, because this is like the number one. Everybody, I can't give them feedback. They don't want feedback. They're not listening to feedback. Oh, blah, blah, blah. You just got to tell them how great they are. Well, what's your response to that?
That's one of the chapters where we talk about a strategy. To just cut to the chase, my strategy on this one is an acronym called ALEG. You know how forever, never, never we said this is the leg you got to stand on? Meaning this is, you can go to the bank on this. So ALEG reminds me of my 4-step process that I use with a Gen Zer when I need to offer some hard, firm feedback. The letter A reminds me I need to start with asking, not telling. I want to tell them what they've done wrong. That's really what I want to do. But if I begin with a question like, what was your thought process when you made that decision? You ever think about when we ask someone questions about themselves, they feel valued. Like, you want to hear my thought on that? The letter L, I need to listen. In fact, it does little good to ask a question if I'm not really willing to do the work of listening. When I listen, they feel heard, which is the number one request Gen Z has coming into a career. I want to have a voice on this team. The letter E is empathize. So this is a learned art. Wanda, you may be naturally good at this. I bet you are. As an older male, I had to learn to find a way to say things like, oh, I hear you, and I bet that made you feel awful when that happened. Or I had no idea that was part of your story. But when I empathize, they feel understood. So think about this. Ask, they feel valued. listen, they feel heard, empathize, they feel understood. Now I have earned my right to do the thing I wanted to do from the beginning, which is letter G, to guide them. But I did it again through a bridge, not a badge. Again, I keep going back to that phrase. They don't want to feel like commodities, and many of them do. So can I tell a quick story on this?
Yes, please go.
Colin Webb. I met Colin a number of years ago when he was in high school, smart kid, just north of Atlanta where I live. We kind of had a coaching relationship going on for years. Colin was so intelligent, he went off to MIT for college, did really well there. And Wanda, you can imagine when he graduated, he had a number of job offers. Well, he decided to move to Detroit and work for one of the big three, General Motors. So he gets a job there and he's working hard, but he obviously, as a Gen Zer, sees several improvements that can be made at this old school, can I say that, way of doing things. So he starts making a list. He takes him to his supervisor. He says, we should do professional development better here. Oh, we can improve that process or this system here. Well, the response he got was very dissatisfying. His supervisor basically said, Colin, you just need to keep your head down, keep your nose to the grindstone, do your work. I paid you to work. Go. Well, Colin said, yes, sir. He's very respectful, but he wasn't finished. So get this. You're going to love this. Colin decides to email the CEO of General Motors, Mary Barra, and he lists all these ideas he's got. Mary replies to him. She says, Colin, these are great ideas. Let me take them to my executive team. So she does. They agree. These are really good ideas. But as you can imagine, when they make their way down the org chart to the middle manager now, they die on the vine. In fact, Colin was told, you got to be around here 8 years before you get to lead anything. So what happened was what you just mentioned. He leaves within a year. He's no longer there. He has since started 3 companies. He just sold one and it's doing quite well as an entrepreneur. He just sent me a note on a new thing he's doing with robotics that is just crazy. Well, I think GM lost someone unnecessarily. Had they done it more new school than old school, had they treated him as if he were currency to invest in, not a commodity to use and abuse, I think they would have won him over. And too often we're losing Gen Z, even if they stay on the job.
Yeah. I hear from the younger generations that I talk to that they are desperate for feedback, that they really, really want to know, that there are things they know they need to learn, things that they don't know, and they want to know more. And often they use language that isn't particularly helpful to a manager because they say, I want to learn how to lead. And the manager thinks, forget that, 8 years from now, you can get running. But that's not what they mean. What they really mean, I think, is I want to know how to influence. I want to know how to be persuasive. I want to know how to communicate better. I want to know how to make a difference. They want, all of which is leadership in many ways. So they just don't have great language for it, but I think they're desperate for feedback. But I think you're right at the very beginning. I think there are 2 things about it. One is, if you're going to treat me like a commodity, why would I listen to your feedback? What good is that? Like, if you just stop to say, you don't care about me and how I perform, so why do I believe your feedback is useful to me?
Yeah.
Okay?
No, great question. Yeah.
All right, so fair. And then the second, you can't hold on to it for 6 months in a performance review and pile it on with 15 things you've done or even 3 things you've done right. That just is demoralizing.
Yeah.
And they think, why bother?
You're right. The average Gen Zer wants daily feedback. Now, a boss might go, are you kidding me? But think about the video game they played in high school and college. It was instant feedback. They knew exactly where they stood. So daily check-ins, even if it's just, hey, good job today. That matters to them. And Wanda, you touched on something else that reminded me some more data. 72% of today's high school kids want to be an entrepreneur, which tells me they'd rather start something than join something. But what if we could create a workspace that felt like a startup in some ways? It's established, but we have an entrepreneurial zone where we get some Gen Zers and some other creatives over there, and we turn them loose on 1 or 2 problems that we really need to solve. And it feels like a startup. And by the way, boss, you set aside budget for the untold fruits of their labor in that zone. This could be the best of both worlds. And I bet you could keep them. I really do. Yeah.
Well, I suspect you're not going to keep anybody for terribly long. So I think the days of joining for 10 and 20 years are gone. 20 has been gone for a long time, but 10 is still even plausible. And this might, but if I think about it, if I'm 22, 23, joining a company, I want to have a great experience for the first 3, 4, maybe 5 years, okay? But then I want to experience something else. Now, I may hate the something else, but there's just a what else is out there. I want to know what it's like. And I think we make a mistake. So I think we are to target 3 to 5 years. That would be a good time frame. That would be a win. Go try something else, but know the door is open to come back.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, let me illustrate. So there is a frozen yogurt chain called Orange Leaf Frozen Yogurt that was getting frustrated that, teenagers or 20-somethings were coming in and leaving in less than a year. It felt like they'd poured into them and then they're gone, and now we have to retrain and find and so forth. So Orange Leaf Frozen Yogurt decided, let's make this job we're asking them to do the best first job they could ever have.
Okay.
And so they saw it as a launching pad. And then they would say to the young team member that's coming on staff, what do you really want to do? What's your dream? So forth. And if they said, well, I want to do this, or I want to learn bookkeeping, or I want to learn this, they would say, we're going to be a training ground. Now, I need you to sell frozen yogurt, but we're going to get you back with Bob on the bookkeeping and let you learn how to do that and learn this and learn that. Bottom line, it's almost like reverse psychology. They started staying longer because they were being mentored.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, we won them through a bridge, not a badge.
Yeah.
That's again, I'm sorry about this chorus that keeps coming up in the song, but this was counterintuitive, but they were training. Now, Wanda, you and I both remember Zig Ziglar's phrase where an employer goes, well, what if I train them and they leave? And Zig would always say, well, what if you don't and they stay?
Yeah, exactly.
To pour into them and, get them ready. But you're right. The door stays open because they may come back and go, this was a good place for me. Let me come back. Yeah.
Well, more importantly, they say to their friends, this is a good place, you should go and work there. Or to their younger siblings, or to the younger people that are following them and they're influencing. Hey, you should try, check. Anyway, there's a lot of wins on that
true.
one.
It really is.
Okay, so you said feedback. We start with asking so they feel valued. What are you thinking? How did this happen? In a calm way, not an accusatory way. The L is for listening, so that they feel that they have a voice, that they've been heard. A little empathy. Like as I hadn't thought about it that way. That's an interesting idea. So they feel understood. And then guide. Guide is not, well, you got that totally wrong. Guide is, well, here's how I would have done it. Or here's a way to consider. Or here's what I thought you missed in that. I think then you've got spaces to give them the kind of feedback that they're actually looking for.
Yeah, you're right. You're right on. In fact, I would add one tidbit to that. In one section of the book, I try to help the reader, who I'm assuming is over 40 maybe, they're not Gen Z, to really understand the view of authority that Gen Z has is very different than the one that I have. Neither right or wrong, but I need to know what I got coming at me. So we would say, you need to listen to the man at the top or the woman at the top. They would say the person at the top should be listening to us. We have the future coming with us. We might say your position gives you the right to influence. They would say your connection gives you the right to influence. Again, we would say the leader's a gatekeeper of all power and budget and authority. And they would say, I'd rather you not be a gatekeeper. And really, you're not anyway. You're a guy. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
That's exactly what you're saying.
We've experienced a democratization of the workplace in so many ways. So I know I'm a redundant chorus here, but listeners, please learn. This is going to sound really cheesy. Forgive me. Learn how to love those young team members. Learn how to pour into them. And you know what? Some will go. Maybe all will go. But you will have created an environment that's growth mindset oriented. And they will probably keep them longer than the average boss does. And I think you'll end up with a win in the end. I really, really do.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come back to, especially for our millennial managers who are stuck in the middle of an organization, who are frustrated with that stuck, frustrated that they can't get the influence they want, frustrated with the bureaucracy and the 1,500 checks that have to happen in order to move anything forward, frustrated that they see a solution and can't get anybody out of the way to actually implement it. And then they've got Gen Z also on their heels saying, wait, care for me. I mean, I just want to be empathetic. It's no excuse, by the way, because you said this is Gen Z is the sandpaper you need on your leadership. And you're going to have to learn, if you're going to have any kind of employees at all, you're going to have to learn how to do this in a better way than you have been trained to do it.
I agree.
Okay.
This is well put. Thank you for saying that, Wanda. That's spot on.
I'm just like so into what we are doing wrong to the managers that we are trying to we got to do better than this. All right, talk to me for a minute about mental health. So there's a lot written about this young generation, about their mental health. It's easy to say, geez, are they just weak or do they have no stamina? And I'm going to give a slight bias, and the other is there's a lot coming at them. So what's your take on their mental health? And more importantly, what do we do about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, we need to recognize this is a thing. We can't, that's just in their head. Mental health issues are a thing. And if we don't acknowledge it, we definitely will lose them and maybe never get them in the first place because they see us as old school that sees them as fragile snowflakes. In the book, I actually have an entire chapter on how to deal with this. So let me throw out 4 words very quickly, maybe 5 words that I talk about in that chapter. First of all, we need to communicate to them that we see this as an issue. It has been anxiety has been normalized. Sometimes anxiety disorders, panic attacks, depression. They're going to want to take PTOs, maybe way more than Gen X or Boomers for sure, and maybe more than millennials. So 5 words that begin with M. The first one is margin. I think it's good for supervisors or managers to make sure, is your mental health problem the fact that you have no margin in your day or even your after work hours? You're distracted. You have notifications coming at you. There's noise and clutter everywhere. Some of the anxiety can be reduced if we just put in our calendar some space for margin and quiet. And we don't like that because we get bored, but boredom is good. So margin is number 1. Number 2, I would say number 2 would be movement. And what I mean by that is, you know this, Wanda, the average person at work is sedentary. We're sitting at a computer or something like that. And so the endorphins are not flowing. We're not getting energized by, and our mental health is suffering because of that. So I would say place in the day 1 or 2 times where they're up and moving. In our office, we have a bunch of 20-somethings. I see them walking around the building 3 or 4 times midday, just getting moving, getting those happy chemicals flowing through the body. It's going to help. This is science. Number 3, mindfulness. Now, this may sound hocus pocus or whatever, but mindfulness is simply a short period of time during the day where they're actually going to get better as a worker if they take time and push pause and they focus their thinking and they focus on breathing. And maybe they focus on one item that isn't a task that's ahead of them. I think mindfulness, or call it meditation, if you will, for just a few minutes is actually an investment, not an expense. I think it's going to pay off later. The last word I'd give you is management. I think we need to help our Gen Zers actually manage their mental health. So now let me keep it real. You may disagree with this, listeners, but I'm going to keep it real because Wanda told me to say this. No, she didn't. She didn't tell me to say this. We need to tell those Gen Zers, you know what? Life is hard. I get stressed out too. It's kind of normal. We don't have a disorder. It's normal. And we need to know you're not weird. You just need to know life can be stressful. The problem is we need to learn, I would say we need to learn skills, not mechanisms. Sometimes we have coping mechanisms that are not healthy. I have to binge on 5 hours of video games. It's the only way I make it through the day. Coping skills are great skills that say, yep, work is hard. Yep, life is hard, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to rise to the occasion and build my grit muscles as big as they need to be. So that's one side of the coin. The other side, though, is we talked about empathy earlier. If I have noticed, if I communicate empathy to Cam, who's 40 years younger than me, or Andrew, who's 30 years younger than me, they lean in back, they reciprocate. Like if I pay attention to their personal growth and needs, they tend to pay attention to my mission and my, you know what I'm saying? I shouldn't say my, but the bigger picture. But if they don't see that, they're going, man, I'm looking out for number one because you're not looking out for me. Well, that's not a relationship we want to have. So again, it pays off to be personal.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I want to push this empathy button for a bit because, I mean, you know, I look at what the younger generation is going to face in the world and the challenges they have compared to what I faced at that age. Geez, like it isn't even, like there's not even light and day. I mean, yes, I had challenges for sure, but I didn't feel like the world was about to, you know, go into some craziness. And there wasn't climate change. And there wasn't the news, the 24/7, the way there's a whole bunch of stuff that just wasn't there to raise my anxiety levels.
Yes.
So I want to be empathetic. They live in a world where there's a lot of stuff to be anxious about.
It's overwhelming. Yeah, no doubt. May I insert something real quick?
Yeah.
Doctors tell us today, MDs tell us today, the average teenager experiences the same level of anxiety as a psychiatric patient did in the 1950s. So I know. So we'd be in an asylum or whatever. This is normalized. We had more mass shootings in America the last 2 years than we had days in the year. So you're right. My biggest problem in middle school was, where's my baseball mitt? How do I find a girlfriend? Well, they're thinking about mass shootings and you know, all kinds of things. So you're right. I'm glad you brought that up. We think they're fragile snowflakes. Life is overwhelming right now, and they're very young. So, yeah.
Agreed. And we also know from a number of studies that their social connections are deficit. So again, as I grew up, there were a bunch of neighborhood kids. You know, you were out in the streets playing until mom came and screamed at you, or what, you know, whatever other variation. There were always more social activities. There's just not a lot of that free play social connection. There are organized activities, but I'm not convinced that that builds the same kind of social connections as the kid next door that I did everything with for the last 15 years.
You're spot on. You're spot on. It's exactly what's happening.
So that adds to the anxiety. And then they're looking for something at work that we are not used to knowing how to provide at work.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. In fact, I would say to that, especially because they haven't developed those social skills, social and emotional intelligence, some of the rites of passage that young adults used to go through, dating, drinking at the right age, sex, those are not happening. Teen sex is down, teen dating is down, but they're the loneliest generation on record because their connections are on this device I have in my hand, this portable device, rather than really, you just mentioned that neighbor next door that you learn to resolve conflict and play together and make up your own rules. Man, you got ready for adulthood in childhood, you know? And that's not happening. Unfortunately, we're supervising everything as a grown-up. So
Yeah.
It's not been helpful.
Yeah. And I don't want to rail on the devices because I actually think in ways the devices keep us more connected than we ever were, in ways I think that are brilliant. But I still got to have the social skills to kind of help with the mental health along the way. Okay, Tim. Last question for you. Do you see this as a global phenomena or a Western/US phenomena?
Yeah. It is global. It is global. In fact, I've been to 50 countries and surveyed and tested many of them, developing nations and industrialized nations. However, there are differences in how it shows up in Kenya rather than Singapore, for instance. But here's what I would say to you. As Thomas Friedman taught us, the world is flat. The television and the internet are the great equalizers. I talked to a young person from Gen Z in Singapore, and he said, Dr. Tim, I have more in common with teenagers in America than I do my own parents here in Singapore. So just know this is coming, if it's not already arrived, all over the place. And we need to pay attention to this population that we happen to call Gen Z, young adults who are coming of age. And I believe they may be your greatest challenge, supervisors listening, but they also represent the greatest solution to future challenges if you lead them well. Right. They're the sandpaper on my leadership.
Sandpaper on your leadership. Okay, I'm going to give a couple of quotes back from you. You earn your right to lead through a bridge, not a badge. Connect at a personal level. Can't tell you can't get anything else done if you don't start there. You got to know one personal thing about every Gen Z you're working for you. Period. End story. And then I love your a leg. Ask so they feel valued, listen so they feel heard, empathize so they feel understood, and then guide, not instruct, teach, tell, guide.
Yeah. Another way to say that is got to connect before you correct.
That's got to connect.
Thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So show and tell, the future begins with Z. I love this book. It's fantastic. Tim, I love your work and the writing for all of it. This one's even better than the last ones. So if people wanted to get in touch with you, not that the last ones weren't great. They were fabulous. I didn't say that very well. But I love this one.
Good.
Filled with practical strategies, 9 strategies for getting through dealing with this Generation Z in a way that's going to become really positive. Tim, if somebody wants to reach out to you, where's the best way to find you?
Yeah, well, the easiest step is just to go to my site, timelmore.com, my name, timelmore.com. And you can find the book there, The Future Begins with Z, or you can go to thefuturebeginswithz.com and get bonus material. Or you can go to Amazon. If you can't remember anything else, you can go to Amazon. But I really, listeners, I know this sounds self-serving. I want you to get this book and it becomes an encyclopedia. Maybe you don't need to read all the chapters, just 3, 7, and 8 on where you really need to grow in your areas. But I think this upcoming generation may be the one that changes the world for the better, and you get to benefit from what they bring to the team if we're leading well.
Better still, you get to be a better leader. So
yes.
How about that?
That's personal coming at you. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So Tim Elmore and I have just been talking about his brand new book, The Future Begins with Z. We've been talking about how to get the best out of Generation Z. And Tim has such great stories. I just want you to tell us one unique story for those people who are on the YouTube channel and want to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I remember being a young kid, and I'm an old man now. I'm a baby boomer. But the older generations did something for us that we needed desperately. So in the 1960s, when I was a child growing up, I remember when the United States, and specifically NASA, put a man on the moon, July of 1969. The story behind the story, though, is quite impressive. So when John F. Kennedy made the announcement twice in the early 60s, we're going to put a man on the moon, NASA did not even have the technology to do such a thing. It was like bizarre. So they had to go retrieve new tech, new computers. And of course, when they came in, the older guys there, 50-somethings, were going, I don't know how to do this. So they had those young interns coming in from Purdue and MIT and Georgia Tech and other places. So does this sound familiar, by the way? They started leaning on those young men usually coming in. And so get this, during the course of the 1960s, the older generations became SimSoups, simulator supervisors. They were the mentors who were allowing the 20-somethings to run the show, to run the operations to put Neil Armstrong on the moon. So I don't know if you know this, listeners, but the average age of the operator at NASA in Houston, 27 years old. I would have sworn he was 47 or 57. And the guy that actually said no, that said go, not no, to put Neil Armstrong on the moon, Jack Garman, 23 years old. So I'm thinking, wow, it was a high stakes venture, and the older generations got the younger generation ready and turned them loose. I'm saying it's time to do it again. We've got to do this for the emerging generations coming up. Let's trust them. Let's do it together.
Wow. I did not realize those characters were that age at that moment in time.
Yeah.
We don't portray them that way in all the movies, and that's a discredit.
Yeah.
But also this notion of what does it mean to get the bureaucracy, all the stuff out of the way so that the younger generation can really focus on solving a problem. Tim, it's always a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for being here. What great wisdom, what great insight, both on leading in general, I think, but also particularly leading this generation and what we need to be doing to get the best out of them, the best out of our workplaces, the best out of our organizations as well. All right, then check out our podcast on our brand new YouTube channel called Out of the Comfort Pod. You can check out our website, outofthecomfortzone.com. We've got links to lots of materials there, and we have shorts on the YouTube as well. And if you're really interested in this millennial problem, this mid-career problem, check out exceptionalleaders.com. And otherwise, join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone.
Thank you for joining us today. Tune in for another edition next week with Dr. Wanda Wallace on the Voice America Business Channel. Reach outside your comfort zone this week.